Hi. All right. Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is Sudeep Sen sitting in New Delhi.
And Indran, Amirthanayagam in Rockville, Maryland.
And we have four wonderful poets, as you can see in the poster. There's Shash Trevett from Sri Lanka, who currently lives in the UK. Abhay K from India, who is currently living in Madagascar. Then there's Kenia Canu from Mexico, who lives in Mexico, thankfully. And then Aminur Rahman, who's all over the world, but he lives in Dhaka. And he joins us from Dhaka. And we will follow that particular order. You know the rules. We will also ask Indran to say something as well as Dawn in terms of technical use. Indran, are you there?
Yes, sure. Well, I mean, yeah, you know, Sudeep and I started the series in the late 80s in around 1990 in New York, and it was a living room and pass the hat around and a jug of wine and collect donations and give them to the poets invited and the writers invited. And some of those people have gone on to great fame, and at the time were already famous for us because we invited them for the quality of their work, and that's a constant of this series, the quality of the work, how profound it is, how moving it is, how essential it is. And so excited today to have four great poets, and looking forward to hearing their work and engaging in conversation with them. Welcome.
And Dawn is our technical director, though he's a wonderful poet and he's terribly modest. Dawn, would you like to tell the poets the basic tech stuff?
Hi everyone. I'm Don Krieger. I'm in New York today. It's wonderful to see those of you that I've met before, Aminur and Shash, and those that I haven't, of course. I'll be recording, I am recording this, and the recording will be accessible to everyone on Facebook. And then both Indran and Sudeep will put the recording up on YouTube, so it'll be widely distributed. The live stream will be accessible live on Facebook to about 20,000 people. Obviously not that many people will watch it live, but over the next week or two, we'll probably get at least a few hundred views. So a lot of people will see your reading. One thing I would ask is when you're not speaking, please keep your mic muted. That'll help us with the quality of the sound. But remember it, so you have to unmute yourselves when you want to speak. And thank you so much for reading this wonderful series. Sudeep's connection just dropped out. That's the second time that's happened.
Oh dear. Okay. And Sudeep was scheduled to introduce the first of our poets today. Well, he's just coming back in. Of course, I can introduce Shash Trevett with much pleasure as well as Sudeep. Wonderful poet and a compatriot, a paisano, as we say in Spanish. Well, there's Sudeep is back, so
yes, sorry again, Zoom cut me off.
Go ahead, Sudeep.
So we begin with Shash Trevett, who's a great discovery for me, frankly, her poetry at least. And she's just published a wonderful chapbook, and her poetry is incredibly incisive and strong, but you'll see that when she reads. Let me just read out the formal bio. Shash Trevett is a Tamil from Sri Lanka who came to the UK to escape the civil war. She's a poet and translator of Tamil poetry into English. She has collaborated with artists and composers and is the winner of the Northern Writers Award. Her pamphlet, From a Borrowed Land, was published in May 2021, this year, by Smith Doorstop. She is currently co-editing with Vidyan Ravindran and Seni Senevitarane, an anthology of Tamil, English, and similar poetry from Sri Lanka and its diaspora communities, to be published by Blood Axe in 2023. Shash was the 2019 Apprentice Poet in Residence at the Ilkley Literature Festival and is a 2021 Visible Communities Translator in Residence at the National Center for Writing. She is a 2021 Ledbury Critic and a board member of the wonderful, wonderful journal founded by Ted Hughes and Danny Weisbord, Modern Poetry in Translation. Shash, it's a real treat and pleasure to have you. A very warm welcome.
Thank you, Sudeep and Indran for inviting me. And I'm so looking forward to reading alongside Kenia and Aminur and Abhay, who I know are wonderful poets themselves. It's such a privilege, so thank you. Right, I'm reading from my new pamphlet and I'll just start. New words, new clothes. I discarded the words first, and then for a while, mute silence. I watched and learnt like a minor bird. A became A, E became E. I changed to a short, sharp I. After a while, through whispers and croaks, new words emerged in the borrowed tongue of a borrowed land. Tentative, tiny, and uncomplicated, brand new, pain-free little words. Their strange scrolls flowed around me. F was once a little fish, Z was once a piece of zinc, X was once a great King Xerxes. For the first time I formed an F, wrote a Z, sounded an X. In the borrowed tongue of a borrowed land, I dressed myself in them. I abandoned 2 millennia of poetry, mythology, and history. No Pallavan or Cholan could claim sovereignty over my mouth, my tongue, my mind. In the borrowed tongue of a borrowed land, in single, stuttering, borrowed syllables, I began to talk again, and the new words began to flow.
Marvelous, beautiful.
I write about the Sri Lankan Civil War and about women, and sometimes they both intersect. This is a war poem. Stone walls. I remember the day the tanks rolled up and we hid in that narrow room at the back of the house. The birds fell silent. In a moment of stillness, we heard quite clearly, Ek, do, teen, fire. Over and over, each shout followed by a thud, each thud followed by a crash, each crash and splintering of our world amplified in that narrow space. Glass shattered, timber collapsed, dust and frazzed danced in the air as the ceilings blushed hot. I remember over the boom of the tanks, the thin tinkling of the piano as bullets ricocheted off walls and door frames. Our hearts paused. You and I cowered on that floor, petrified. It took an hour for the house to capitulate in flames. So the neighbors said later, when they found us hardened into a stone stillness. although we returned many times through the years to that room. On that day, in that year, when the tanks had done their job and moved away, we emerged, two bodies, deadened to feelings, so cold, so numb, so walled in. That was our tragedy. This next poem is called Mudume Kolam, and in Tamil that literally means patterns of old age. Kolams are patterns that Tamil women draw in front of their houses as prayers every morning. They sort of look a bit like that. It's on my cover of my pamphlets. This poem is about the disappeared in Sri Lanka. Feet planted in perfect balance, she bends each morning, deftly dotting the floor. Each pulley a prayer, each sikku a curving embrace. The fish, birds and flowers, her suns, moons and stars, her patterned privations flow through from the outside in, a propitiation, so that he might not disappear into the darkness, so that her lips might call him forth from the unknown. Each curve and syllable of his name, a proclamation of his absence. For months she has performed these Mudume Kolams for him, while somewhere he washes her feet daily with his tears. The next two poems are a couple of my women poems, which I really enjoy writing them, and I love reading them as well. I was Naama. I was known by many names and now by none. I was Naama, the pleasant one, mother to all creation. The hourglass gathered pace in my shadow. I was Emzara, Betanos, Barthanon. Wheat and millet swayed to my song. Around my feet grew common reed, papyrus sedge, and bulrushes. I was Haikal in Arabic. Through my mouth, sunrose flowers, blue pimpernel, and yaknuk spoke a language of their own. Cumin and chamomile formed my veil. In Georgian, I was Ta'aja, a temple. Bitter herbs formed my seat. Out of my left arm grew olive trees, cypress and cedar of Lebanon, red bush, date palms and myrrh out of my right. I was Nemzar in Armenian. I knew every lacewing of every petal, every wrinkled bark, each sharp thorn. I twirled every leaf in dewdrops and hid a covenant into each rotund kernel. I was Emzara Noyemzar, Noria to the Gnostics. The Babylonians called me Taitia. I was the sunrise of creation, the moon glow of eternity. In the book of Jasher, I was Naama, the pleasant one. Now I am known only as the wife of Noah. This next poem was, I read an article about this lady called Anne Lowe, who was a seamstress. And the interesting fact about her was that she made Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. But on the day of the wedding, Jackie Kennedy was in such a mood because her father-in-law had taken over the wedding and basically she had no say in anything, that when the photographers and the press asked her who made the wedding dress, she didn't give the name of the seamstress, which meant that the lady who made the dress couldn't benefit from. So I wanted to write about that. And so this is this poem. Anne Lowe, New York, 1953. A colored woman made it. No name, no significance. Cotton bobbins spin the wheel. The cotton flower blooms in the antebellum South. Pick, pick, unstitch, 50 yards of ivory silk, tucked and banded, like her great-grandmother flicking the cotton bowls. Quick fingers, precise eyes, the cotton flower blooms in an endless summer. Bridal white for a senator's wife. Backstitch, chain stitch, blind whip stitch, cotton reel, satin finish. Who made your dress, Miss Bouvier? A colored woman made it. No name, no voice. The cotton flower blooms, a lineage of seamstresses. Pin, tuck, a portrait neckline, full skirt, embroidered flowers, cotton flowers, circles tracing patterns, widening, concentric, like her great-grandmother's arms stroking the cotton crop. The cotton flower blooms in manacled abundance. Watered silk, French knot, couching blanket stitch, bridal white for a president's wife. Who made your dress, Miss Bouvier? A colored woman made it.
Yes.
Am I all right for time?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll just read, I'll read two more, they're short. Okay. Things happen. We're back to war again now. When they pepper neighborhoods with imported mortars and expansive tank fire, when they go from house to house, lining up girls, women, and men in revenge or on a whim, when they shut down substations and impose curfews and travel embargoes so that market sellers face ruin, when people go unfed, unwashed, and scavenge for scraps, when they shoot blindfolded men in the back and take souvenirs of mutilated lives and hopes, when they rape girls and grandmothers and celebrate the hecatomb of their success, things happen and the world moves on. I'll finish with this poem about my grandfather's house. I saw photos of it. Somebody had gone to Sri Lanka, taken photos of his house, which is now dilapidated. So my grandfather's house. There is moss growing in the bedrooms of my grandfather's house, green and sticky, staining the walls and the floor with shades of the sea. They climb, tracing intricate patterns around brown squares where pictures used to hang. The roof has fallen in. Water stagnates on a cushioned floor as disturbed bats circle, drawing the night in. The rooms are empty of all that was him. The doors have been locked, warped and unwilling to open onto a tomorrow which does not contain him. It is 6 o'clock, and the mosquitoes gather noisily in rooms that once smelt of sweet margosa leaves. They are the music makers, the sum total of our dreams, the inheritors of rooms that reek and sweat in angry dismay. There is moss growing in the bedrooms of my grandfather's house, and raindrops sing a lament on deserted floors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sing a lament on deserted floors. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It was just such a, the poetry is just so tightly wrought. And there's so much packed in. In fact, sometimes I wonder whether you should preface your interludes with, you say that I write about women and war. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. In fact, reading your poems, it's sort of both micro and macro in the sense that you're talking about the specificity of femininity, womanhood, gender, female gender, and so on. But it's actually a very, very expansive political comment, not just, clearly not Sri Lankan women. I mean, I love that poem about you were various women, and you, in just one stanza, you were painting these wonderful stories. And the other thing is, of course, you're talking about the history of Sri Lankan war, but in a sense, what I see from the poems is it's actually talking about ravages of time, war, and conflict in general that surrounds the world. So do you want to tell us about the fact that you're sitting in England? The reason I ask this is because your tonality is very, very English, very English. So therefore, the poems which are about Sri Lanka translate very differently. It translates internationally, so to speak. So talk about that, how you balance these two sort of very difficult South Asian and international tenor in your poetic voice.
That's a really interesting question. No, thank you. Thank you for all the nice stuff you said. I think that first poem I read about how I did become mute as a result of trauma. And I haven't spoken a word of Tamil since. Even though I translate Tamil poetry, I can't bring myself to speak it. I cannot speak it. I can understand it. I can have conversations with people where they speak in Tamil and I will listen and respond in English fluently, and I read it fluently. And I think that 6 months where I just did not speak, my brain did something a bit strange with language. I think obviously I have some sort of affinity with languages, but when I then did start speaking, I only spoke English. And since 13, I suppose my accent sort of disappeared slowly. Although I do have little quirks that my family love. I can't say my V's and my W's. And so, you know, around the dinner table, it's all, can you say, I went wandering down the Wye Valley? You know, I can't do it. But so I still have traces of my accent, but I think I've lived too long here. I felt a need to reject my homeland when I got here. I think I'd been through such a hard, horrible war that there was a need to do that. My parents basically just wanted me to forget about everything and move on. So that included cutting ties with everyone from Sri Lanka. So it's only now through poetry that I'm rediscovering my Tamil roots, as it were. And I do have a very complicated relationship with Tamil. So even though I need to translate these poetry of witness that's coming out of Sri Lanka, and it is a need and it needs to be done, it takes a real toll on me to do it, but I need to do it. So yeah, I think, yes, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't belong here. I certainly don't belong there. People view me with suspicion as soon as I start speaking, if I'm speaking to Tamil people, because they say, oh, well, you can't be one of us. But I am, you know. It's just, don't judge me don't put labels onto me, because I don't want to be labeled.
Yeah.
So.
You certainly belong to the world of poetry, which is why you're such a shining star. I mean, I was thinking of Indran's poems, whose work I've known for 30, 40 years. I don't know how long it is now, and I really admire his work. And the way he writes back to Sri Lanka from an American lens, very much an American lens, is also interesting parallels. Of course, he does it very, very differently. And you're putting this big anthology of Tamil Sinhalese English poetry from Sri Lanka and the diaspora together, because this is probably the first time a proper international anthology of Sri Lankan poetry will be out in the world. So I think let's hear about that and tell us about that, because I think that's something very important to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic working with Indran and Saini, who are two giants of British poetry. And I'm definitely the younger junior partner. But I'm in charge of the Tamil section, and we've learned a lot from each other. Vivian's brought in the Anglophone poetry, which is great. And we're learning a lot about Sinhalese poetry, which we don't know much about. So I'm glad we've got a long time to prepare this volume. There have been anthologies that have come out of Sri Lanka, but they've been published in the East, and it's very hard to get hold of them. So this is the first time there will be a definitive overview of post-independence poetry from Sri Lanka, so 1948 to 2022. We've opened up to submission, so we've had various people, some young poets who nobody knows, they've submitted, and we've found some wonderful finds, which we're very excited about. And then we're also going through all the old stuff which are out of print that we can't get hold of. Luckily, because Vidyan's at Harvard and he can interlibrary loan quite a few of these books, but even those, they're just lost. So we're finding we're trying to contact people to see if they've got something in their library to sort of bring these poems out into the public again. So yeah, we're very excited about it, and it's been fantastic. I mean, the Sinhalese poets write in Sinhala, but mainly English. Tamil poets only write in Tamil, and there is a political reason for that, and that's fascinating as well. So there's a lot of translation involved, and yeah, it's going to be good, hopefully, and we're so glad that we've taken it.
I so many questions and comments, but and also I'm aware of the time, but Sash, I have to say thank you for this amazing work, and also I wonder if Tambimutu is in the anthology, or if you're just a curious question.
It is a curious question because it could be either the Indian anthology or Sri Lankan anthology. Yes.
Yeah, no, Tambimutu, of course, was the Tamil who started Poetry London, and I mean, anyway.
Yeah, although the current Poetry London's not the old Poetry London.
No, it's not the no, nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they've taken the name.
They've taken the name.
We had a long conversation about that, and I think Tambimutu will be featured because he achieved so much in the 1940s and 50s in this country when he was here.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, I have one just also observation. The trauma that you write about, that you talk about with Tamil, I mean, you that could have been my answer, you know, in a sense, or much of it, because I also stopped using Tamil when I got to London as an 8-year-old. I think I must have said to myself, I won't speak any more Tamil, because I wanted to sort of respond to the little lady on a bicycle who started screaming all kinds of abuse at me, you know, all sorts of terrible words that hurt me then, and then another experiences. But in any case, it's a longer chat we'll have someday, and I hope. Thank you again for this beautiful reading, and I'll, as we have time at the end, we'll come back to more questions. Thank you so much, Shash.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now I'd like to introduce my dear friend and ambassador Abhay K. He's India's ambassador to Madagascar. He's in a long tradition of great poet diplomats. He's, you know, it's very much a Latin American tradition. You have Pablo Neruda, Octavio Paz, Carlos Fuentes, poets and novelists as well. But and then you have Saint-Jean Perse, and you know, you have Lawrence Darrell, who was in the British Foreign Service, and then you have Abhay, who is now writing and translating and reporting from different parts of the world. I mean, his Alphabets of Latin America is a fundamental, important work that I think anyone interested in Latin America should read. Poems he wrote in English, but that have been translated into Spanish now, just released in Spanish, and they're being translated into other languages, I think in Italian as well. And you know, one of the great gifts of Abhay is his ability to build bridges across cultures and languages, and you know, it's just phenomenal to me, and celebrate his work, his his support of poetry as opposed to the poet, as he often says. So of course, there's a little bit of the poet always in the support of the poetry. I mean, we have to live and we have to move, but poetry is the goal and the subject. And this is not an introduction from the biography. This is an introduction from the heart. And I hope Abhay will forgive me if I haven't mentioned all of the details. He has achieved many books. I mean, he has anthologies of Indian poems available in many languages. He has his own work, I think about 9 different collections of his own poetry, including the most recent book, The Alphabets of Latin America, and also a book in English, The Magic of Madagascar, which has been translated into French and has just been released by La Matin in France. And so I'll stop there and welcome our dear friend Abhay to the microphone. Go ahead, Abhay. Please.
Abhay, really warm welcome to you from New Delhi. You know, your country, though you're sitting very far away, and literally far away from the screen too. So you should come up a little bit so we can see your face.
I see.
That's good.
Looking forward to hearing you. I've put the formal bio on the side so people can read it in great detail. And I also welcome you from my heart. Yes, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Indran, for such a warm and heartfelt introduction. And I would like to thank all of you, Indran, Sudeep Da, and Don Krieger, for hosting this wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to share my poems. You know, for the first time, I mean, I'm really interested in reading them. So, so I would begin with a poem which I have written in Madagascar. It's called Monsoon, which connects different islands in the Indian Ocean with India, actually, including Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and South Asia. So it's a book-length poem, but I'm only going to read the first 10 stanzas. And here it is. Monsoon. I wake up with your thoughts, your fragrance reaching me, all the way from the Himalayas to the island of Madagascar, brought by monsoon from the Himalayan valleys to the hills of Antananarivo. I dream of you every night. The bright golden dawn snatches my dreams, but the morning bridge comes whispering your name, filling my mind with your thoughts, only your thoughts, my love. I had heard you singing your love song in the perfumed Himalayan valley, your tender bosom still blossoming, and since then I have dreamed of you night after night. Now I am far away in this emerald island, surrounded by the Indian Ocean, craving for your sweet kisses, gazing at the moon, Mars, and Venus, and myriad star constellations, hoping you are gazing at them too. I wait for the monsoon to be born, to send you sights, sounds, and fragrance of this island, fragrant with vanilla, cloves, ylang ylang, and plants and herbs of different kinds. O monsoon, web-like mass of air, the ancient traveler from the sea to the land in summer, go to my love in the enchanted Himalayan valley. You will surely be back here again. For centuries, you have taken merchants across the Indian Ocean. You have guided the legendary Sindbad and Vasco da Gama and brought wealth and joy to millions. Your absence, alas, brings famine and death. The gift of gods offered with rains, at times just a flash of scattered showers, at times unceasing downpour, for days at a stretch, wetting passion of your young lovers with your exotic fragrance and sound. Lovesick and far away from my beloved, I pray to you, take along with you the sweet song of Vasa parrots, the haunting wail of the Indri, the mating songs of the humpback whales, the sound of sea waves crashing on the coral beaches at Nosy Bay, cicadas vibrating their timbals in Ankarana, Hupo's song traveling far, crossing barriers and walls, the crested drongo singing its sweet song in the rainforest. Thank you. There's another poem. It's called The Fire and Sermon, which is inspired from the Fire Sermon of T.S. Eliot. And it's a poem about South Asia. So again, the river's soul is slashed, its 5 fingers fractured and dammed with an imaginary borderline. The wind crosses back and forth the ancient land, unhindered. The saint has departed. Sweet Indus, flow gently till I sing again. The river bears no bloodstains, partition papers, silk flags, passports, blue or green, or other remains of dark midnights. The saint has departed. And the successors, the drifting souls of the subcontinent, departed, have left only their words of wisdom. By the lost waters of Saraswati, I sit down and weep. Sweet Indus, flow gently till I sing again. Sweet Indus, flow gently, for I tread a rough terrain. I hear explosions in Pokhran, the split of the atoms, shock waves ripping the world apart. Violent storms blew through the desert, drowning villages and cities in sand, while I was strolling on Bandra Bandstand on a hot summer evening in Bombay. The desert shook again, this time in Quetta, while I was grazing cows in Baluchistan. Dust rose in the sky, turning the day into night, and dry, hot wind from the desert destroyed all the sunflowers from Peshawar to Kanyakumari. But from time to time, I hear talks of sunflowers being revived or of planting a new crop of similar kind, which will grow as fast and shine as bright. Oh, the sun shines bright in the desert, and there's no water. We drink only milk and eat only dessert. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschitta dukha bhav bhavet. Ram, Ram, Sita Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ishwar Allah, Tero Naam, Sabko Sammati De Bhagwan. Eternal city under the smoke of November noon, Mrs. Call, the civil servant, bright as a ruby, in her finest sari, stitched in Banaras by Banke Bihari, asked me gently in English to dine at the India International Center. followed by a luminous night at a 5-star hotel. At the midnight hour, when the world slips, turning and tossing in beds, when the humanity recuperates like a frog hibernating in winter, I, Lord Mountbatten, though blind, swinging across the subcontinent, partitioned with a pen on paper, can see at the midnight hour the sun setting over the British Empire. Heading homeward as the sailor returns home from sea, it's tea time in London, time to make one's own breakfast, fire one's own stove and open canned tin food. Of the vast empire over which the sun never set, what has been left? Souvenirs, loot, Kohinoor and maps. I, Mountbatten, now an old man with wrinkled skin, foresaw what was coming and left the scene. All awaited that expected moment. Nehru, the impatient man with the gift of gab, arrived. The last Englishman, Macaulay's true son, one of a kind the British could trust, someone who could speak the language, a confidant. The propitious hour arrived at midnight as he agreed. The Raj ended. India woke up from centuries of slumber for its tryst with destiny, but broken and limping, partitioned and bleeding, assaulted by invaders and tribesmen heavily armed, inviting immediate response that made a substantial difference. And I, the time, have foreseen it all, enacted on the same ancient land of Bharat. I have fought in Kurukshetra and Karnal, and walked along the dead after the great war of Mahabharat. I, Mountbatten, deliver my final farewell speech and grope my way after the sunset on the empire to the sea. India takes a long sigh and looks in the mirror, fully aware of its newfound freedom. Its numb, amputated body feels a streak of terror. It must move on. Now what's done is done. When even great men stoop to folly and commit despicable acts, partitioning the land, it wipes tears with its tender left hand and sobs silently alone at dawn. A new music plays in the Mughal gardens and along the Rajpath up to the Central Secretariat. O Delhi, I can sometimes hear, besides a public monument at the India Gate, the pleasant sounds of the common people's choir and cooing and wooing of lovers under the moon, where the soldiers of India marched in Mesopotamia, Persia, Flanders, East Africa, Gallipoli, and France sign in splendor. The Yamuna drains darkness from Delhi's soul with the downpour of monsoon in August, flooding parts of the city, the bloodbath, a sea of refugees at the Kingsway camp past the Delhi University. Vaheguru, Vaheguru, Ishwar Allah, Ishwar Allah. Men and women beating their chests, the boundary drawn, an artificial line in ink and blood, spilled on paper, rippled the lake. Monsoon wind carried across the subcontinent the wells of children, men and women. Vaheguru, Vaheguru, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तां हमारा, हम बुलबुलें हैं इसके, ये गुलिस्तां हमारा. Shayyad Ahmad Khan conceived a new Gulistan. Iqbal sang a new Tarana, and Jinnah undid me. My heart in the Hindu Kush and my feet in Arunachal, my hands stretched from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. After the partition, I cried. They promised a new dawn. I kept silent. What could I say? On Siachen Glacier, I cannot think. I cannot link anything with anything. The frost-bitten bodies of my sons, my humble sons who expect nothing. Ram, Ram. To Rajghat, then I came and saw the scent, burning, 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 burning. He Ram, sabko sammati de Bhagwan. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhay. Marvelous. And I was saying earlier that the poem is what matters, not the poet. So here, the poem you brought on is the wasteland of Eliot, and you've interpreted it for today and for India, and congratulations. I'm curious to ask you about that role of the poet as teacher, as purveyor of the wisdoms and the truths of the past to contemporary readers and listeners, because I think that you do that as well in this poem and in others. And I also want to mention in passing, just for Kenia, that your book, that I introduced you to the editors at University Autónoma de Nuevo León, and they published the anthology of great Indian poems there. So that book is actually available in Mexico. Abhay, can you talk to us about the role of poet as teacher, interpreter, and why you go to these great poems and make them your own, and in making new poems from them?
I think, that's what Eliot did himself, I think, when he talked about minor poems and major poems, and his famous quote that that average poets, they mimic, the great poets steal. So I mean, what he meant by that you basically most of the literary work is intertextual. I mean, they have references here and there, and I think when I was reading Eliot's work, I found that I find his style unparalleled. I mean, I haven't come across any other poet so far who can match Eliot's style in English poetry. So, and these poems sort of, they spoke to me in the sense that I could immediately imagine the same scene which I just read, and these lines automatically flowed. So I think I found a connection. I mean, even my poem Proof Rock at the Carnival in Rio is a rewriting of the Proof Rock poem, and published by the Poetry Salzburg Review. And it's a poem which sort of automatically comes. You imagine Proof Rock at the Carnival, and I think I'm able to better express myself, by reinterpreting the works of the great masters. And I have done it for Borges as well. There's a poem in the Alphabets of Latin America called Borges, which Borges himself probably could have written. So I mean, I find it fascinating to make these these dialogue with the poets who really matter to me, and whose work I find that they speak to me. So and it's all by chance, I mean, it just happens by chance. So I think to answer your question, that poets as interpreters and bridge builders, I mean, because as an interpreter, you build a bridge. I mean, you translate, you interpret. So I think, and even as a novelist, look at, I mean, I was listening to the talk of our recent Nobel laureate Abdul Razak Gunra, and a fascinating story he weaves of the Indian Ocean, where India frequently comes, and how he brings, I mean, he says that, probably one very pertinent point he makes is that, probably you think that, but I mean, the world is much more complex, and, you bring, you look at the history, and there are so many elements interwoven in things. Things are not as they appear on the surface, and I think poetry, and as a poet or as a writer, you do that. You try to make, I mean, you try to not simplify things, but you try to interweave the connections that exist in anything. I mean, so
and I think you do it very well. I mean, you do it so well that it cannot be imitated, but it must be stolen from, rather. So soon
yeah,
there will be a
completely
poem.
stolen.
Soon there will be a poem after Abhay K. And then we will see.
It's difficult to imitate after an imitation of an imitation, because it's going to be a long phrase. But Abhay, tell me one more thing. I've been following your work for a long time. You used to send me your first early works to me. I've loved you. I think the second book was something. And
yes.
then you've gone on to Nobility Heights, clearly. Tell me, your poetry is very closely aligned to your life. It's almost like a diary. Everywhere you go, you produce 2 or 3 books, or 4 or 5
Not
or 6.
2 or 3.
Something astonishing. So it's an astonishing number. So in a sense, the question was, how closely is your poetry linked to your memoir writing or a reportage? Because I can see a lot of that happening, because it's a record of your stay wherever you are and your comment on wherever you are.
Well, see, writing first, first of all, writing is about memory, or about record keeping, in the sense, I write because I don't want to forget, and I want to remember. So you're right. I mean, but then, it's not factual. I mean, my poetry is a mix of the fact and imagination, and also it brings not only history, but also mythology, not only reason, but also superstitions, because I think that all these matter equally in literature and in our lives. I mean, people think that human beings are guided by reasons, but we are not. We are a species which cannot bear reality exposure of reality for a long time. So we need all these. So I try to weave all these together. For example, in this poem, or in Monsoon, for example, which I just read, I try to bring together, the belief systems. What do we think about, and what actually, the way things are in many poems in alphabets of Latin America. I try to do that. So it becomes a kind of, I also feel, as Rilke said, the job, and also Chinua Achebe, that the job of the writer is to praise, is to celebrate, celebrate the places, people, the monuments, the festivals, and celebrate life. So I also try to do that. I feel that I have this responsibility to write about the places, because nobody else is doing that.
Well, many congratulations. May you flourish as you do. You don't need any of us to help you. And you will write about things consistently, but it's really a treat for both Indran and I to have you on the program.
Thank you. Thank you. Very kind of you.
Thank you very much, Abhay. Now, it gives me a great pleasure and honor, some Un placer enorme introducir la poeta Kenia Canu, my dear friend, Mexican friend who lives now in Cuernavaca. Kenia Canu is a great poet. She's resplendent. I mean, her poetry, and it's mysterious and it's startling, you know, in a very visceral way. I mean, there's trauma in it, and there's redemption and a movement towards the light, you know, which I'm grateful for, and so it's inspiring and affirming, you know, there's so much I can say, but I've had the pleasure of starting to translate Kenia's work. Just one poem so far, which I will try out at the end. She will read in. I mean, she speaks English very perfectly, but she will read fluently. But she will read in her original Spanish, and then various translators have done the poems in English. So let me just say, I think the bio is the bio in the chat.
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So I'll let people read the bio in the chat, the formal bio, but just note that she is one of the Mexico's sort of essential poets, and there are a number of them. It's a country that celebrates poets and supports them economically in a way that some other countries don't, and so it supports refugees too, which I'm sorry that currently there are some troubles with refugees in Mexico and passes through. But that's a political subject we can discuss. But it's a country that historically has been a great friend to exiles and refugees, and there's so many. And I had the pleasure of, for example, when I lived in Mexico, seeing the Casa del Refugio, no, and which gives asylum to writers from different parts, conflict-ridden parts of the world. Anyway, Kenia, adelante. Gracias.
Indran,
Gracias.
thank you
Welcome.
very, very much for the invitation. I'm really grateful to share this lovely space with all these poets. It's a pleasure to read among Shash and Abhay. So yes, as my dear Indran said, we are going to do a bilingual reading. So I'm going to start in Spanish from this book, who is named Diario de Poemas Incómodos, which would be like uncomfortable poems diary. And it has to do with how we manage to survive, you know, between all these changes and violence that we experiment. But also we must find a way, as Abhay was saying, to pray and celebrate too. No? So, well, I'm going to share this one for you. So it has only the date of the day, and it's 17. It's only a number. De la caja de la proporción de mi alma, de los pedazos, de las visiones y los contrastes, del contratiempo, del enderezado bien, del mal y de la prisa, de todo lo que no cabe en una contemplación, de este martes que se borrará, de los sabores en la boca secos, de los higos que se acompañan de cordero. Nadie escuchó el balido. De esas despedidas prolongadas, de lo que hemos querido olvidar, de lo que no podemos, lo que decimos de mejor modo por incapacidad, de las desproporciones del sueño, de los letreros despostillados y las descomposturas, de las posturas clavadas en tu entrecejo, del bramido, del alimento sin pausa en tu oreja, del rastro vertido, del rostro que vio la cara del cielo, de aquellos que dices haber amado, de un corte fino de carnes frías, del prosciutto y el tomate con semillas, explotando dentro de tu boca, de los detalles, de los vecinos, del todo en orden. Ella no sabe nada, del reverso de las cartas, de todas las historias a medias, que me dejen en paz, que te dejes en paz y que te abras, saques tu regla, tu balanza. ¿Tiene esto cierta verdad? ¿Quién podría tener miedo de morir? Si los retornos, las medias vueltas, mírame, sosténme detrás. La muerte no tiene sostén, no usa, no amamanta, no serena, no conoce ropa cómoda. ¿Tienes miedo de morir? Podría matar a este animal, destriparlo, tripa tras tripa, trabado misterio en indiscreta proporción.
From the boxed proportion of my soul, from the pieces, the visions, and the contrasts, from the setbacks, from the straightening, the contorting, and the haste, from everything that cannot fit in, contemplation, from that Tuesday that will be erased, from the flavors dried in the mouth, from figs married with lamb, no one heard the bleating, from those prolonged farewells, from everything we've wanted to forget, from what we cannot forget, from what we say in a better way because of our shortcomings, from the disproportion of dreams, from the chipped off signs and the untidiness, from the stances pinned between your eyebrows, from the bellowing, from the nourishing sounds that enter your ear constantly, from the traces spilled, from the face that saw the expression in the sky, from those you said you loved, from a fine cut of cured meat, from prosciutto and tomato and its seeds exploding in your mouth, from details, neighbors, from everything that is in order. She doesn't know anything, from the backs of the letters, from all the half-told stories, that they leave me alone, that you leave yourself alone, and that you open yourself, take out your ruler, your scales. Does this hold some truth? Who could be afraid of dying? If the U-turns, the half-turns, look at me and hold me. Death does not need supported. It doesn't breastfeed, doesn't appease, doesn't know comfortable clothing. Are you afraid of dying? I could kill this animal, gut it, bowel by bowel, jammed mystery in indiscreet proportion.
Wonderful.
Ahora,
Thank you.
no, thank you very much. Ingrid.
Kenia.
Now, one book named An Animal for the Eyes, which is the one who is Indran working on it with the translations, which I'm honored about that. So I'm going to read one that is a dialogue with Lucian Freud's painting. And it's this girl with her father, no, in the portrait. So it's also a dialogue with my own father. It's called Retrato de Casa. Ella tiene un ciervo blanco en los ojos. Esto es totalmente aleatorio. Pidió hablar con el corazón. Su piel es pálida. Él ha abotonado su pequeño saco verde con dificultad. Ya no le queda bien. Las mangas son demasiado cortas. Él es un gran cazador temeroso. Un gasneo oscuro repite el nudo de su garganta. Controla todo con su mirada. Las líneas se agolpan en su ceño y el huerto sin juicio entrega la presa generosa. Ella parece asustada, pero se acomoda. Cuando crezca será una seductora vulnerable. Recuerdas tu saco aterciopelado. La idea de tu madre ya había muerto en tu bolsillo izquierdo, ese que tu padre toca con la punta de sus dedos. El ciervo se enreda en el cabello delgado y escaso de la niña. No hay orden para comprender al padre. Conoce tus debilidades. Posiblemente tengas 4 o 5 años y ya te sientes lista. Tu idea del amor nunca fue excesiva. Confías primero en la espina y luego en la rosa, en la huida del gamo. Tu padre te ha contado un sueño. Tenía miedo de dejar el vientre de su madre. Creía que era de él. Falta un botón. Los botones son redondos y sujetan. Un ojal disponible como el cuerpo de una libélula sin alas cerca de su corazón. Tengo el corazón en los ojos y el pequeño ciervo bebe mi sangre. Es un animal manso. Basta con obediencia. Su volumen es perfecto cuando no hace nada y suelta la mirada en el llano herboso. Encontraron el cuerpo del rumiante sin cabeza, dice la nota. La mano de mi padre sostiene mi espalda con dulzura. No lleva ningún arma. Yo mastico los lápices y aprieto los dientes de vez en cuando. Te ves fea, dice, y me imita inflando los orificios de la nariz. Hoy el ciervo no se quiso levantar. Nos hicieron el retrato a ambos. Mi padre lleva el sombrero de lana negro que usa en días especiales. Sus ojos fijos quisieran preguntarme algo ahora que soy grande. Cuando era joven decían sus manos que tenía todo bajo control, pero no era cierto. Cuando el ciervo dormía, mi padre inquieto soltaba a los perros sin misericordia. La primera vez que nevó en mi jardín, sí, he soñado con mi padre desnudo. Lo pintó Lucian Freud en 1949, quizá por encargo de Henry Bow Milton. Padre e hija aparecen entre la cortina de semillas de fusta comprada en Galería Lafayette. En esa apertura están los dos. La pequeña mano regordeta sobre el muslo de papá es un lugar seguro. 5 años y 5 dedos confiados. El saco del padre punteado como una noche estrellada. Cuando piensa en estrellas, ella recuerda la definición hermética. ¿Cómo era aquella historia del padre de HD? Su padre tenía un telescopio y le enseñó a mirar en la oscuridad. Pero este cuadro tiene un fondo hueso amarillento. El cuerpo del ciervo blanco fue hallado sin cabeza. Todavía cálido como este calor tibio que siento por mi padre y su descendencia vulnerable, de pie entre sus rodillas, entre sus contradicciones y caídas. Él sujeta mi brazo izquierdo, el hacedor más cercano a mi corazón. Balthus pintó un cuadro de Miró con su hija Dolores. No sé si ella lo quería tanto.
Portrait, portrait of a hunt, a house. She has a white heart in her eyes. This is absolutely random. She asked to speak with the heart. Her skin is pale. Father has buttoned his small green jacket with difficulty. It does not fit well. The sleeves are too short. He is a great yet fearful hunter. A dark tie repeats the knot of his throat, controls everything with its gaze. Lines jostle in his frown, and the orchard without judgment delivers the generous prey. She seems frightened, but she adjusts herself. When she grows up, she will be a vulnerable seductress. Do you remember your velvet jacket? Your mother's image had already died in your left pocket, the one your father touches with the tip of his fingers. The deer is tangled in the thin and scarce hair of the girl. There is no right sequence to understand the father. You know your weaknesses. You're possibly 4 or 5 years old, and you feel sharp already. Your idea of love was never excessive. You first trust the thorn and then the rose in the fallow deer's flight. Your father has told you a dream. He was afraid of leaving his mother's womb. He believed that it was his. A button is missing. The buttons are round and tight. A buttonhole available like the body of a dragonfly without wings near her heart. my heart in my eyes. The young stag drinks my blood. It is a meek animal. It grazes obediently. Its volume is perfect. When it does nothing and lets loose a look over the grassy field, they found the body of the ruminant without head, the note says. My father's other hand sustains my back with sweetness. It carries no arms. I chew pencils and grind my teeth from time to time. You look ugly, he says, and mirrors me, inflating his nostril. Today, the deer did not want to wake up. They made the portrait for both of us. My father wore a black woolen hat on special days. His fixed eyes wanted to ask me something now that I have grown up. When young, his hands said that he had everything under control. That was not true. When the deer slept, my anxious father let the dogs loose without mercy. The first time that snow fell in my garden, yes, I have dreamed of my father naked. Lucian Freud painted him in 1949, perhaps at the request of Henry Bow Milton. Father and daughter appear in the curtain of crop seeds bought in Lafayette galleries. The two are in that opening. A small plump hand over father's thigh, a safe place, 5 years and 5 trusting fingers. Father's jacket spotted like a starry night. When she thinks of stars, she remembers the hermetic definition. What was that story of H.D.'s father? Her father had a telescope and taught her to look in the darkness. This painting has an odd white-colored background. The body of the white deer was found without its head. Still pleasing, like this lukewarm heat I feel for my father and his vulnerable descendants. Standing at his knees between his contradictions and falls, he supports my left arm, the maker closest to my heart. Balthus painted Miro with his daughter Dolores. I do not know if she loved him as much. Devastating poem, magnificent, beautiful. Thank you. Kenya.
Yes. Now with the last poem that I will share with you. It's also about, it's in this book named The Animal for the Eyes, An Animal for the Eyes. And it's a dialogue also with this poem of Auden named Address to the Beasts. So as Abhay say, we are all like thieves. No, we are all inspired by the others. So I will read this one. Pastarán los animales mansos sobre mi cuerpo, y mis fuerzas habrán cumplido, y habrá valido aquello que vieron ya los ojos. Pastarán los animales mansos sobre mi cuerpo, y habré dejado de querer interpretarlos. Pastarán, y mi cuerpo se devolverá a la hierba para recuperar su inocencia. Habré dejado de reprocharme tantas cosas, no contar las sílabas exactas, la injusta proporción en el poema. Bastarán las bestias y los otros, mis congéneres, seguirán cumpliendo la tarea puntual, reparar los puentes, recibir los últimos alientos. Mi cuerpo vuelto al horizontal, mi carne como un legado para las hormigas, pero no será mi cuerpo sino el nuestro cadáver compartido, la alianza final en la que sí hablaremos, el polvo generoso de las uniones, el lenguaje cumplido de las larvas. No habrá sido inútil de amarnos de algún modo, el imperfecto, el punto en que no comunican nada los zanates, y el colibrí se pasma de igual modo frente a la flor que no desea comprender. Pastarán animales mansos sobre mi cuerpo, y no sabré si ciervo, vaca o buey salivarán mis células. Rumiantes mis últimas palabras, rozarán su paladar puro al fin, la cúspide de aquello que desea haber dicho. Desde este silencio honraré la lucidez de Virginia, el templo cerrado de la ermita, pero más, Me importa la devoción del hombre puesto como una rama para sus hermanos sin alas, el equilibrio que gana aquel que duda, el gozo de los niños que todavía no pierden. No habré prometido eternidad y aún las bestias se nutrirán de mí, de ti, nosotros, de aquella mujer llevada y suelta ya en el río.
I will read the English now. Meek animals will graze on my body, and my strength will have been spent, and my eyes will have seen nothing that was not worthy of their sight. Meek animals will graze on my body, and I will no longer need to interpret them. They will graze, and my body, returned to the grass, will recover its innocence. I will have stopped reproaching myself for so much. Cease counting the exact syllables, the unjust proportions of a poem. The beasts and others will graze, my kin, my comrades will continue to fulfill the appointed task, repair bridges, receive the last breaths. My flesh horizontal once more will be the legacy of ants, but it will not be my body. It will be our body, our shared corpse, the final alliance through which we will finally talk, the generous dust of our union, the punctual language of larvae. It will not be useless to have loved each other, to have loved each somehow imperfectly, where the Zanati bird communicates nothing and the hummingbird is stunned before the flower. It has no desire to understand. Meek animals will graze on my body, and I will not know if deer, cow, or rocks will salivate my cells, ruminate on my last words, touch your pure palate at last, the tip of what I wish my tongue had said. From that silence, I will honor the lucid Virginia, the closed temple of the hermit, closed but even more. I care about the devotion of a man who reaches out like a steady branch to his brothers without wings, the balance won by one who doubts, the joy children haven't lost yet. I will not have promised eternity, and even so, the beasts will nourish themselves on me, on you, us, from that woman who was taken to the river and was set to lose there. Marvelous. Muchísimas gracias, Kenia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Kenya, and wonderful, Indran. I think the quote from Kenya's poem, which sums it up, is the generous dust of our union, the punctual language of lava. The way the lava of Kenya's poetry is being transformed into a butterfly by Indran, and the generosity and the dust that it leaves behind. It's beautiful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. In fact, I was feeling frustrated when you were reading the second poem because he hadn't pasted it on the side, and it was later. So, but it's interesting. Let me ask you this question about translations itself, because when I hear the Spanish, I don't understand most of it, of course. It has a particular kind of rhythm. When I hear Indran's translation, it has this really dense kind of phrase making. So perhaps you can address that for the viewers, because I find the tone when I'm hearing the poem, and often hearing is the biggest test for good poetry, is clearly consciously calibrated differently, both by the poet and the translator.
Indran, would you like to say something about the translations, or should I?
Well, I mean, I can just say that I've had just one of the poems, the hunter and the house poem that I translated. Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question. It's a very good question. It's hard to know how to, you know. I want to say that there are sound tonalities and phrasing in English that's belongs to English, and finding the corresponding one in English for the original is tough. Maybe it's an impossible task. You just have to find a correspondence or an equivalent in English that, but I mean, these poems are so visceral for me, you know, when I read them. I mean, I really am in a Francis Bacon, you know, painting or something, or I'm in the innards and of the animal, you know, and yet there's this beautiful Spanish that is melodic and very pleasing to the ear. But then the image that struck me among many is the hummingbird is stunned before the flower. It has no desire to understand. I mean,
Yes.
the fragility. I'm sorry, I'm not really addressing the question directly because I'm also unsure. Sometimes it's an instinctive thing. When I translate a poem, it really comes from the guts, but it comes instinctively from the the intestine as well as the mind. You know, you have to take care of the intestine to live. You have to translate from the intestine as well as the higher spaces. You know, and I think that's how I feel when I'm translating a poem. But I'm also aware that she is able to read the version in English and comment, and so we have a ways to go. We dialogue, a dialogue to engage in, to come up with the most definitive versions of that poem and others, and really looking forward to that. Kenia, would you like to comment
Yes,
about? Yeah.
I probably would like to add something, about this silence that we must really share, beneath the poem. So I remember this extraordinary essay about Pura Lopez Colomé, and I don't know if you know the name, maybe you know.
Yes.
She's a wonderful translator and poet, of course, and she's my teacher too. But she says this essay was called Imperfect Semblance, Imperfecta Semejanza. Is that right?
Imperfect resemblance, or
imperfect resemblance. And she said that this silence is really which bears the poem outside, the thing that we can really see above. So I think that in this work with Indran, and I didn't name the other poet who helped me, who is Ekiwa Adler, who's also a great poet. So I think that we must communicate in that way, and probably there we'll find a way to
No, it's already working very beautifully. One of the other things that struck me was your interest in responding to art, ekphrastic verse. Freud was a wonderful example how you not only look at the painting, but also transport your own story onto the painting back. Bacon, Indran referred to. How much of visual arts?
A lot. I really.
That must be a big influence, because I can see from the English translations there's a lot of contemporary art and art history in general.
Absolutely. That I think that's one of my my passions. Yes, I have a book which is called Parcela Blanca, which is a white parcel, to talk about this empty canvas. And there I have many works with, like, for example, Joseph Beuys, or also Bacon that you have named. So I really, really like that. I think art is really close to poetry, sometimes more than even novels. I don't know what you think about, but I think that paintings are really close to poems, that you can see there also, like this sustained instant, this where you can go there and just fly. So yeah, I really like ekphrasis. I do it a lot, so I will be pleased to share with you, Sudeep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kenia and Indran. I think it's as we would say in Hindi or Urdu, a great jugalbandi, a duet It's a very, very
And we're
common
wearing
way of-
matching colors too.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh! Clearly, you've phoned each other and matched your wardrobe too. Yes, well done.
Pure coincidence.
Thank you
Anyway.
very much.
It was a real treat. And Indran, you always do such a good job.
Thank you.
Translating, and your voice just sort of lifts things at a different level. And talking about voice, talking about baritone, talking about the booming quality when someone reads his poetry is Aminur Rahman, who holds the flag of Bangladesh aloft, I think. Wherever you see, it's Aminur Rahman everywhere. He's a tireless promoter of poetry, like all of us are. Abhay does a wonderful job. Indran does a wonderful job. Aminur, you do a wonderful job. We are all sort of collectively trying to host poetry, put it out there for others to enjoy, because let's face it, without poetry, there's not much life left for many of us, Everything else is tertiary. So, Aminur, it's a real treat to have you on my program. Of course, I know Aminur from a long time ago too. As it tends to happen in these poetry communities, you meet through poetry and you become lifelong friends. The other wonderful thing about Aminur and my relationship is I share his mother tongue. It's one of my mother tongues. Bangla is one of my mother tongues, he writes in. So it's, my access to his poetry is much, much more intimate. And I've had the privilege of translating his first book of poetry into English called Love and Other Poems, which is still around doing really well and has been translated into more languages that I can think of since then. So Aminur, it's a real treat to have you. I'm going to post the bio, of course, on the side. Let me do that again. He lives in Dhaka, where I lived for 5 years of my life, which was a very, very important time in my life. And let me just read out his biography formally, because it's important, I think. Aminur Rahman was born in Dhaka, Bangladesh in 1966 and graduated with a M Pharmacy degree. He has published 11 collections of poems in Bangla. His work has been translated into more than 25 languages. His poetry books appear in English, Spanish, German, Japanese, Mongolian, Arabic, Chinese, Pasha Malay, Russian, and French. He's also an art critic and has 3 prose books to his credit. As a translator, he has translated 13 books of poetry and has edited the Sark Anthology of Poems and Short Stories and the Dhaka Review recently. As an invited author, Rahman has read his work worldwide at various international festivals, universities, and cultural venues, and is a winner of many awards, including most recently the Dinesh Das Award in 2019 in India, and the Minada Award 2019 in Macedonia. Aminur, namaskar, a great warm welcome from this side of the border to you.
Thank you very much, Sudeep and Indran and Don and all the poets who are here. It is really a privilege to listen beautiful poets, 3 poets, and a few I knew actually earlier, and few are new to me also. But anyway, I'm reading because of time actually is passing by very, very fast. I will read my poem in Bangla and English both, but all poems are really this fresh one. So few Bangla is not yet translated to. It's not yet translated, so you can get the essence of Bangla language, the language of Tagore, language of Kazi Nazrul Islam, language of Jivananda Das. And Sudeep, I think here only Sudeep understands a little bit of Bangla. And we did couple of projects, Sudeep and myself. It was a wonderful time, actually, Sudeep, what Sudeep mentioned. We traveled together, we read together from Medellin to a lot of places. So this night, yeah, thank you, Sudeep and Indran and Don and all the poets. I'm reading my poem first in Bangla, that is Dirgho Shash. Dirgho Shash means sigh. এই প্রতিটি দীর্ঘশ্বাসে তুমি মিশে আছো। কি এক অদ্ভুত প্রক্রিয়ায় জীবনের প্রতিটি ছন্দে এই দীর্ঘশ্বাস ব্যাপৃত। যেমন এখন আমার প্রায় প্রতিটি দীর্ঘশ্বাসে তোমার ছোঁয়া পাওয়া যাবে। কি নিদারুণ ভঙ্গিতে তুমি আমাকে রক্তাক্ত করলে, করে যাচ্ছে অবলীলাক্রমে। হৃদয়হীনার আপাত মস্তক স্বপ্নহীনতা। না, তা হয়তো নয়, মরীচিকার পিছনে ছোটা। কিন্তু তুমি তো জানো না, আমার দীর্ঘশ্বাসের চৌহদ্দি বিস্তৃত, বারবার তোমার স্বপ্ন বিলাসে হানা দেবে, ছিনিয়ে আনবে মুহূর্তগুলো যা আমি নির্মাণ করেছি, যার অধিকার শুধু আমার, তোমার নয়। দীর্ঘশ্বাসের সাথে সাথে অমৃত সময় ফিরে আসবে, আসতেই থাকবে যতক্ষণ না মুক্তি পায়। স্বপ্ন মুক্তি নির্ভেজাল নিয়তিতে নিতান্তই চড়ে বেড়ায় পাখির মতো। সকালের পাখিরা যেভাবে চড়ে বেড়ায়, নিস্তরঙ্গ আঙিনায় কুটে কুটে খায় স্বপ্নকুহক, ছিটে ফোঁটা যা থেকে যায় দীর্ঘশ্বাসে আঁচড় লাগায় অজান্তে, যেখানে তোমার প্রবেশাধিকার নেই, যা তুমি হারিয়েছ অনেক আগে, বুঝে বা না বুঝে। দীর্ঘশ্বাস প্রলম্বিত হয়, তুমি হারিয়ে যাও, হারিয়ে যায় দীর্ঘায়িত স্বপ্ন দীর্ঘশ্বাসে।
বাহ, খুব সুন্দর, খুব সুন্দর।
It is in Bangla, right? Thank you, Sudeep. Thanks.
Khub Sundar simply means beautiful, beautiful. But
Yeah.
as Shash writes in the chat box, hearing Bangla is like listening to a whisper, which of course she's punning on the fact that the poem is called Deep Breath or a Sigh.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm reading the poem, it is in English. It's a draft actually, not fresh one. Words no more uttered. Words unexpressed between us were no more uttered to you. Yet at day end, night end, or dreary full noon, I burst out in tears while left alone by your fairies of laughter with a sudden pull. My unconsolable mind bleeding non-stop, yet expecting wholeheartedly a room to stay inside your intricate mind on this lonely walk. Words unexpressed between us were no more uttered to you. Gazing at the intensity of the horses' hooves, Man Singh and Uday Singh drove on their mission. I made the dreamy delusion sprinkles in my bosom, as you are lost in a furthermost end, leaving behind the smell of evergreen madhubi creepers and golden konakchapa blossoms with sweet fragrance. Rearing a rowdy cry inside my mind, I go on, gazing at you in a bid to touch you at the innermost mind, while my thoughts grow restless, like the birds losing their nest and changing their and changing their sides constantly and endless tears. Releasing the death sentence from the Himalayan peak, I march ahead looking for series of my lost dreams, letting the balloons fly we have jointly ventured. Maybe we would meet again where fierce water inundate the vast expanse of the city of hurt in Udaipur. As I burst out in tears with much effort, maybe I shall meet you there in twilight, like the evening sky, clinging to you in the budding darkness of my mind. Words unexpressed between us, but no more attitude. Since this is the way I live my days, why should, we, why should I hide the truth I know that I shall win you someday, at the end of some bird somewhere, either at the Himalayan hinterland or fathomless water of Udaipur, or an arid Egyptian ground where I must win you beside Nefertiti at the end of some bird. Words unexpressed between us, I no more utter to you, never. Though I know quite well that I love you more than anybody on this earth of ours, so passionately that it remains stranger to your recognition, distancing us forever, slightly changing our side, we go too far. This is what I seem to win as my own, as if this is my attainment, engraved in stone, my pent-up words are never expressed and told no more. Again, I'm reading a Bangla poem. It is a rhythmic poem. তুমি কি করে সব হলো? How can you forget everything? আজকাল তুমি সব ভুলেই যাও। কি করে সব হলো? নাকি ইচ্ছে করেই সামনে পাহাড় তোলো? পাহাড়ে সব গাছগাছালি, হাত পা সব ছড়িয়ে দিয়ে এদিক ওদিক নেচে গিয়ে দিব্যি বেঁচে যায়। তুমি কিন্তু উল্টো পথে, নদী থেকে অনেক দূরে, স্বপ্ন থেকে পিছপা হয়ে, সত্যি মন কি চায়? তুমি কি করে সব হলো? মেঘের সাথে ঘুরে বেড়ানো, পানির সাথে গা জড়ানো, আলোক ঝরা দিন, স্বপ্নে ভরা কথার মালা একটু করে পা মিলিয়ে অনন্তে পেলেন। তুমি কি করে সব হলো? মাইলের পর মাইল হেঁটে চারদিক সব রং ছড়িয়ে, একটুখানি হাতে নিয়ে খানিকটা আমায় দিয়ে স্বপ্নে হেঁটে যাওয়া। তুমি কি করে সব হলো? রোদ থেকে কথা এনে, ছায়া থেকে সুর এনে, এলিয়ে দেয়া পাহাড় ঘেঁষে, স্বপ্ন কুটির তৈরি করে এগিয়ে এসে পিছিয়ে গেলে। তুমি কি করে সব হলো? নাকি ইচ্ছে করে সামনে পাহাড় তুলো? তুমি কি করে সব হলো? তুমি কি করে সব হলো? The last one, the death. Last one is the death. It is also a new poem as a draft one. Silently, soundlessly, death separates us one by one, taking away loved ones, known, unknown, close, distant, everyone's taken away. A deathful shadow is spreading. Shadows have fallen all over the courtyard. Have I ever seen the dead before? Yes, I have seen it many times, sometimes unknowingly, sometimes in eternal reality. But this is different, unseen death, one by one, taking away all dear ones, elder to the closest one, everybody. Taking away without talking or informing. Oh, death, we are defeated by your power. We used to be, but nowadays you are in a hurry. What's the hurry? Your insanity about life seems to be a little too much. I know you will attack me too, but remember that I'm living the wave of my love. You can't take them even if you take me. Can you? Maybe you can. Like a heart break, the two may be torn to pieces. Death may take it also. Maybe it will float in deep water. Maybe the primordial will float in the white blue. Maybe that will float blue and reach to a overwhelmed heart somewhere. Death is infinite. Death is cool. Constantly moving little by little in concentration, one by one, everyone, you, I, everyone, you, I, everyone. Thank you very much for listening.
Quite a
Nowadays,
performance.
nowadays, death, you're in a hurry. Yeah, exactly.
For those of you who might have been thinking what the sound at the back was, it's actually an Indian instrument called tanpura. And he was playing the electronic tanpura. These days you have digital access to all these things. And when Aminur reads his poetry, it's quite a performance, you know, it's an event. He comes in silk, there's band and there's horses and elephants all around, metaphorically speaking, and there's fanfare and music at the back. So it's quite a performance. It's not like performance poetry, I have to say, as you understand in the West. This is declamatory poetry, because we're going to talk a little bit about that. He uses an old style, which was there in the past, where it's almost Richard Burton reading Shakespeare, which if you hear now sounds very dated. But if you know Bangla poetry of a certain kind, you lock into that nostalgic space. So even when he reads his English, which to me sounds like Bangla, he reads it in a Bengali tongue, in a sense.
Of course.
So, of course, these are new poems. It's good to see some new poems. I'm, of course, very familiar with the older poems. But, you know, for you, love is so central to your writing, the word love, the idea of love. And now I see, of course, by extension, by mirroring, the idea of death is equally important. Of course, you're writing about COVID and so on in the last poem, clearly. So these two polarities which you're talking about, you know, bring an interesting tension to your poetry and life itself. So even though your poems, when read out aloud and when I hear them in Bangla, is lyrical and uplifting, it's actually quite dark and sad in many ways. Am I right in thinking so?
It's not the sad, actually. You know, Sudeep, from the very beginning, in my when he started writing 30, 40 years back, 30, 35 years back, and that time, you know, that it was the influence of the Baudelaire, the pessimism is very much inside me, in fact, because I love to exercise the pessimism in my writing. In fact, it's not like it's a contradict of life, you know. And when you just put love means not the sweet love or something. It is a different kind of, the suicidal urge is coming. You remember when you just translated that one also. One person told me, actually, oh, Aminur, I have to inform you. It's long back, actually. Inform your family. You are about to suicide or something, you know. But you know, but this is in a contradict of the lifestyle, you know. But because of life is such, when you just think for a poetry, when you write a poetry, it will always, it is a both polarities there. So the positive and negative always clash yourself. And when you just, what I believe, when it will clash too much, so it will come up a very solid form of the poem, or writing a piece of the poem. And I try to exercise, and I believe, actually, poetry is coming from the heaven. I know it is not coming from maybe one line we are, because of that is a saying, that first line, but I believe in other way. It is the first line is coming from the heaven. No, first line you have to write. The other thing is coming from somewhere. So when you just write it down, so that means yeah, it is coming from somewhere. And when it is conflict of your life or your thoughts and others, and it's coming in a different form of a poem. And I believe, and it is the poet has to be exercised on it. It is not like it's coming and just we put it. So we have to exercise more polished way in a poet. That's why we are doing all our doing. And if it is a more polished, more in a modern form, so it will be, people will like it, and it will touch the heart of a poetry lovers. So that's it, actually, Sudeep.
I have a question for you. I mean, wonderful to hear you and to hear you in Bangla. And these poems in English, these are written in English, or these are translations from your
Translation.
From your Bangla?
Translation.
Okay, you don't
Yeah.
write in English directly.
I wrote few, but it's not.
Okay.
This one is not.
My question is a little bit cosmic, I suppose, but before, because we mentioned to go and writing in Bangla and so on. Of course, before Bangladesh, before Pakistan, there was India. There was this vast country that included all of these languages and peoples, and then there was a split, and then and the partition and so on. That crack. I'm wondering whether that is still in the sort of psyche of poetry being written today, and in your own poetry. I'm just curious if you could speak about how one writes today, as opposed to in the time of Tagore. When Tagore was writing, he was part of this polity called India that included this much vaster space. I'm just curious if you could reflect on that. Thanks.
Yeah, Indran, you're absolutely right, because the Tagore died in 1941, means before the partition. And Tagore, if you just see his life, the 10 most productive time in his life, 1890 to 99. So that is 10 or 11 years. He was in Bangladesh, and in Bangladesh, Tagore's he has 3 houses, and he was he ruled some places as a family business and others. So that means and that Padma River and the Golden Boat, it is in Bangladesh, not in Bolpur, and he spent his time in the river because of the Abhay read the poem and the rain. If you want to see the rain, you have to come to this part of the world. Means, of course, Bangladesh and the West Bengal feel part of the West Bengal, and you can see the rain, the pouring for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and what Tagore is expressing, because of in his writing, he was sitting down in the boat for days after days. And that is the creation sun coming up. But what you're just saying, the conflict, because of when you just divided, language is, because of Bangladesh and the West Bengal, it is these two is actually Bengali speaking people. But if you just go to the West Bengal now, it is captured, Sudeep is from the West Bengal, but the West Bengal, the Calcutta and other places, it is actually captured by other languages. Because the Bengali speaking people you hardly will find there, because it is from the Uttar Pradesh and other people are they're capturing the business and the community and others. But this is going on. So that means if you just say the Bangla language is in Bangladesh totally, means there is no other languages in between. But another problem is because of translation of the Bengali books, as what you are asking, that it is very difficult to transfer the books to these 2 countries till now. That means we are facing real problem particularly from Bangladesh to India is very difficult, because of we read Indian poetry, Indian literature because of we manage that one. But from Bangladesh to there, it is very difficult to go there to transfer the books and the libraries and others. And of course, attraction has to be there also. But anyway, so this is still we are struggling in both the countries for the language and our creativity. But we are trying. What Sudeep said, we are trying to do it because of in the pandemic time, I went to Calcutta also because of just 1 month back. And because of it was a Dhaka review launching as well as reading session, poetry reading session was there. So we are trying, those who are active in the poetry activism, we are trying our best to make it happen, not only the West Bengal, Bangladesh, or we are trying to do it in all over the world, from Latin America to Arab. This world is not explored yet. And Arab, because of European and Latin American, of course, Sudeep, Indran, and Abhay, we are, and myself also. So we already reached to that inter-America city. But Arab, say Europe, we already reached, but Arab is unexplored, still unexplored. So that is the thing actually. So we are trying our best to do it, and I'm sure we can do it much better job in future too.
So when Aminur is talking about West Bengal and Bangladesh, it's important to remember, I'm actually not from West Bengal. I'm from the land of Bengal, which is pre-partition Bengal. My maternal, well, we had two homes, one in Faridpur, which is currently in Bangladesh, and the other one in Bankura. This was before the country was divided. So our sense of Bengaliness and history is very different. So if you ask me which are my two homes, it would be probably Faridpur, Bankura, and Delhi. Calcutta doesn't figure at all in the space of the Bengaliness in my head at all. It's a situation which I'm sure is been echoed by Shash earlier. The sort of the emotional and psychological split that you have with language. It's been echoed by Indran. It's Abhay has brought a lot of Latin American poetry out to the English world currently, and now of course Francophone countries. The important thing to realize is language cannot be tamed. It is porous. Governments can try and lock our tongue, but language cannot be tamed. And whatever they can do, poetry will survive. Unfortunately, what happens is we're talking about literature and language, but this particular group, Poets and Writers International and also Conclave, which I co-run, we end up getting writers who 90% of our readers are poets. It's not by chance, and it's not in the intention of ours to exclude novelists, but clearly this is where our heart lies. But also the poetry is something that reaches out much, much more subtly across countries, across languages, and so on. You can see it when a person is reading poetry and you're touched here in your heart. Nobody can stop it. So that's very important. So, when we're talking about Tagore, it's not about East or West. Tagore's relationship with Latin America is so crucial. Campo was so much part of his sort of, relationship, just as Yeats was, and so on. So we are very privileged and lucky to be in this kind of space. And what a lovely, lovely kind of constellation of poets we had. Kenia, Abhay, Indran, Aminur, Shash, marvelous. It's such a joy and treat when all of us get together and hear each other from our soul, but not just the soul, the mind.
Yes, beautiful. And can I just ask just one sort of last question of all in the room, about traveling and poetry. The poet is traveler. I mean, Tagore traveled to South America, as you mentioned, to Sylvia Ocampo, the magazine Sur. Neruda traveled to Ceylon. He was a consul when he began writing residency in La Tierra in Ceylon. Abhay is in Madagascar. Could you just anyone would like to, Kenya, Abhay, anyone, about traveling and its relationship to the creation, and making poems.
Yeah, I think I would like to add, because I have done lots of traveling and lots of writing, in past 10 years. Actually, I'm out since 2012, and it's just going to be 10 years writing and traveling. So I think that, traveling is essential for writing. Proust says that, you can take traveling through imagination, but that's also traveling, I have written anthems on all the planets in the solar system, and that's mental. That's travel by imagination, going to as far as Neptune. And but I find that, in traveling, it opens up, it sort of brings out the humanity we share. It connects us. Even virtually traveling, today, this session is also traveling in the sense that, we are traveling in the minds of the poets, how do they see the world, So I think it's essential for us to have a different perspective. I'm working on a book on Africa, and I've not been able to travel to most of these countries, but I'm taking these virtual tours, watching documentaries, and I find that, I would not be able to get that much of depth if I just visit as a tourist and see the place and come back. But I think what really makes the difference is that, you travel, you physically see the place, but also you do the mental traveling through reading, through listening, through watching. And I think that really makes that completes the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah,
go ahead,
I want to, just because of traveling, what Abhay said is absolutely right. But another thing is because of connectivity is main thing. Because of when you just make not only the sightseeing, in fact, because of when you interact with or interact with other people, means when you just interact, say, Nicaraguan friends or some cultures and others, it will contaminate it to you, in fact, and it will carry over to, say, if I'll go to the Babylon in Iraq. So you don't understand, because of we read so much of Babylon and Iraq and others. But when you go there, if you sit beside the Euphrates River, so it will give a different dimension in your lifestyle. It is not only you will just write one poem or something. The people, the atmosphere you will carry it, and maybe not that moment. You'll write it or some other place, some other time. It will help you, and of course, it is needed for enrichment of your knowledge and others. Is needed, of course.
Well, today, this evening, sorry.
Okay,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was
Kenya.
thinking, yes, I was thinking about this Shash poem about which she said it was for women, and I felt like I would like to introduce into that poem and to continue it, and that's really a kind of travel, no, where you really want to get into the poem and continue it. And in the same way, I was thinking about the sound of each country, or each village. So I think that the way I like to travel is to like sort of become a sound of the place, become an ordinary sound of where you are, not just finding the differences, but like trying to get the real us that we are. Again, this thing between the poems or in the inner verses.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sash?
I was thinking when I was listening to Kenya read and Aminur, and because I don't understand your languages, but there is a physical understanding that crosses, and I feel that about traveling as well, that you can understand each other and you can take that understanding and carry it within your own body. Because I'm actually an agoraphobe, so I don't travel at all. So for me, this is traveling and meeting, and I don't feel it as a limitation to my life in any way, because I'm perfectly happy now, but it was a struggle when I was younger. But these connections, that's what makes life so rich. And I've loved the advent of Zoom. It's been wonderful, really, because we've been able to travel everywhere.
Oh my God, a defender of Zoom.
I
You're
love
a
Zoom.
defender of Zoom. My God, you're a rarity.
I
Now
am. I'm
we are all
proud.
suffering. We are all suffering from Zoomitis, like bronchitis.
Oh no,
We are
no,
complete
no.
hypocrites because we depend so much on Zoom.
Oh, I love Zoom.
Yeah,
I don't
know,
want
I
Zoom
know.
to die. It's going to die a death. I know it's going to go, but you know, I do. It's a window. It's brilliant.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Thank you.
all. It's been, always we go over by at least half an hour. Of course, we make sure that we have that half an hour with us because it's always happens. The program's supposed to be 1.5 hours, but we know it's always going to be 2 hours or more. Thank you for your beautiful, beautiful, varied voices, your language, and I think most importantly, your soul. I think today's event was full of soul. Every time we do an event, it's so different in atmosphere, Indran, don't you think? And
I think
the
soul is a good word.
constellation of the various poets, makes each session so special. But soul
is excellent. I would also say Canto Hondo, the deep song. The deep song was here today with us, and we were singing.
I want to end this with a poem, because two Bengali, persons, poets, and two Latin Americans. I count Indran as a Latin American poet actually, and Kenia. So this is a poem about Victoria Ocampo from the Alphabets of Latin America, and imagine yourself, Bengalis, imagine yourself as Tagore, and Kenia and Indran as Victoria Ocampo. An ailing poet sheltered in her home, her heart. She, his Bizaya, his poetry, his life. Victoria and Tagore, two souls dancing in ecstasy. Purabi blowing incessantly between India and Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. And we'll see you same time next month with Indran and I with 4 other poets. And also, if you're free on Tuesday, I co-host a similar program with Fiona Sampson. It's called Conclave. And next time we have Didi Jackson, Tina Chang, and gosh, I'm forgetting the third poet. But anyway, you'll see the
Carol Mulder.
Carol Mulder. Yes, very, very fine poets. And finally, Dawn, thank you. Dawn Krieger, thank you so much. He's the real anchor of all this, both Conclave and PWSI. I call him the Buddha poet, the real soul behind everything.
Thank you, Dawn, and
thank you. Good night.
Thank
you
very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Good
Bye.
night.
thank you, Shash. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
you.